Hello, I'm Congressmember Judy, representative for California's 28th District and chair of the Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus, or what we call CAPAC. I want to thank the U.S.-Japan Council for inviting me to speak with you all today at your annual conference. Since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, misinformation and xenophobia have led to people blaming Asian Americans for the virus and the economic pain that followed. As a result, there have been over 11,500 anti-Asian hate crimes and incidents reported since 2020. And as many of you know, earlier this year in my hometown of Monterey Park, 11 people were horrendously killed in the worst mass shooting in Los Angeles County history. This senseless violence, along with the 3 years of surging anti-Asian hate, has made many Asian Americans nationwide afraid that they could be the next target. And this current moment of heightened tensions in the U.S.-China relationship has further exacerbated racial profiling and extremist targeting of Asian American communities, like in the revival of alien land laws around the country that ban Chinese immigrants from purchasing property or land. Our communities have been subject to this kind of discrimination since way back in the 1800s, during the times of Yellow Peril, when anti-Chinese sentiment was at its peak and resulted in the Racist and Discriminatory Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882, along with many state laws prohibiting the property ownership of Chinese, Japanese, Korean, and South Asian immigrants. And during World War II, as you know all too well, tensions with Japan and the hysterical scapegoating of entire communities led to this stripping of property ownership rights from Japanese Americans and ultimately to the incarceration of 120,000 Japanese Americans in so-called internment camps. To this day, not a single case of espionage by Japanese Americans was ever proven. And today, already, realtors have reported experiencing business losses and feeling compelled to comply with the new alien land laws in unrealistic, uncomfortable ways, forcing them to act as proxy ICE agents and question people's nationalities. Families are being hurt. Mr. Jiming Shu, one of the plaintiffs in a case brought against the state of Florida over its new alien land law, is a political asylee who was persecuted by the Chinese government and had to flee to the U.S., where he has lived for the past 4 years. Earlier this year, he signed a contract to buy a single-family home near Orlando. But because Mr. Shu's closing date was after the new Florida law took effect on July 1st, he was forced to cancel the contract for the purchase of the property. As a result, Mr. Shu lost both his new home and his $30,000 deposit. We cannot let history repeat itself. We must strengthen our voices. As chair of CAPAC, I'm negotiating to keep these kinds of harmful provisions out of all major legislation, and recently joined Congressmember Al Green to introduce a bill prohibiting such state laws from taking effect. And in the past few years, I've led the caucus in fighting back against anti-Asian hate with press conferences, statements, hearings, and finally, the passage of the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act. When this bill was signed into law by President Biden in 2021, it was the first advancement in hate crime legislation in 30 years. And we have seen that far too many Americans do not know about our community's long history and many contributions to this country. So our CAPAC member, Representative Grace Meng, worked on a bill to start the long process for creating a National Smithsonian Museum of APA History and Culture, which President Biden also signed into law. This is a small but very important step in a years-long process, but by starting here, one day we can educate the public that AANHPI history is American history. But this work doesn't happen through CAPAC alone. It is in partnership with so many of you here today, leaders in the government, business, academia, and nonprofit sectors who are committed to advancing unity, equity, and justice, not just for Japanese Americans, but for the entire Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander community and all marginalized communities. We must continue standing together in the face of discrimination and injustice. And as we continue to educate our nation's leaders on the history of racism and bigotry that AA and HPIs have faced, we must also stand up for other communities suffering the same thing. One thing I know, and that is, while diversity is our strength, unity is our power. So thank you again to the U.S.-Japan Council for inviting me here today and for your tireless work in connecting diverse leaders together to make a better future for the Asia-Pacific region, our diaspora communities, and beyond.